Okay, everybody, I think I'll get started. As you're aware, I just hit the recording button so that we can actually have this available to watch it after the fact. But at this point, I think we'll just start doing the PowerPoint presentation, what the actual updates to the field manual are. There was a significant rewrite that we did for this latest version of it. It was published and effective as of January 2018, so this is a document that should be getting used into the future. I guess I should throw an introduction in there. This is Ken Johnson. I work out of Central Office Traffic. I'm the State Work Zone Pavement Marking and Traffic Devices Engineer, and was part of a task force that was initiated to update the field manual based on changes that were necessary and changes in practices that we felt ought to be reflected in this type of document. So I guess we can just get started. If anyone has any questions, you can save it to the end and I can answer questions at that point. If something really comes up and you're very interested in a response, I can also answer. Just make sure that you end up just letting me know through the audio, because I don't know if I'll have too much access to Skype here. So anyway, we'll go with this. What we're going to answer today is, what is the field manual? Many people, well, most ought to know out of this audience what it's all about. And I think that's one of the key points that I wanted to bring up, is that this is not meant to be a training for the field manual. It's meant to identify the changes that we've had in the field manual since the last go-around. The last field manual was published in 2014, and so this is going to identify the major changes between that version and this version. For full training, there are other opportunities for that type of training. Kathy Schaefer out of the Office of Maintenance and CTAP is available to conduct training. And for externals, there is also additional training from CTAP as well for the full training. This is meant to be a notification about what the changes are, so that within your districts you'd be able to let others know what the changes are, and that's essentially it. Kathy is also going to hold an update meeting on March 5th for other people who would like to have a more full in-depth review of what the changes are. Her session is going to last about 4 hours. This session is intended to last about an hour. So I'm going to be going through this relatively quickly, but that's where we are with this at this point. I'll talk about who was involved with the update, and then I'll go directly into the key changes that you ought to be aware of as you're implementing the layouts in the field manual. So the field manual is part of the Minnesota Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. It's the only engineering-related manual that's required by statute. All the other documents that we use, whether it's the Green Book or the Road Design Manual, those are all guidance documents for the traffic professionals and the engineers as they're doing the design work and so forth. Traffic control, because we want people to be able to travel in Hawaii, Alaska, and all the other states. We want that to be consistent across the country. The FHWA publishes their own version of the MUTCD, and the Minnesota MUT has to be in substantial conformance with the federal manual, but our state law does say that the Commissioner of Transportation needs to publish Minnesota Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. So we start with the federal one, and then we go through it, and there's a Minnesota Committee of Uniform Traffic Control Devices that includes representatives from cities and counties. We got engineering consultants on there, and we've got MnDOT personnel on there. That's important because this document covers all the roads that are open to the public in the state, township roads, county roads, city roads, not just state highways. So the MnMUT is not a MnDOT document. We're involved with publishing it, and we chair the committee, but it's governed by this other committee, the Minnesota Committee on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. On the screen there, you can see what the address is to be able to get to the MnMUT. The entire document is probably about 4 or 5 inches thick, so it's a really big document. Part 6 within the document is specifically for temporary traffic control, and within that temporary traffic control chapter is the field manual. Part 6K of the MnMUT is the field manual. It's included in the manual, but we also publish it as a separate document because it is very useful to have that separate document out in the field. It's used by anyone who's doing temporary traffic control in the state, or at least it ought to be, because it is required to be used on any of the roads open to the public. Now, this document is meant to be used for temporary traffic control of 3 days or less. Could also be used for more long-term projects if you've got daily lane closures. If you go beyond that time frame, though, there really ought to be a temporary traffic control plan developed by the road agency or by a consultant working for the road agency, and then that gets published as part of the plan, and that's what gets followed for that. But for 3 days or less, this is the document that you would then end up using. This is version 13.0. There have been 12 previous versions of the field manual. Here is a slide showing them. The earliest one was published in 1972, and here are the other 12 versions. Notice that their 1998 version on the left-hand side of the screen there, we actually did have a metric version of the field manual. Just interesting side note. But these are all the previous versions that we've been dealing with in the past. So the rewrite that we started on this, it started in April 2016, and we had participants from across the board. We had counties involved, we had various cities involved, state aid was involved, the Northland chapter of ATSA was involved, and we included the people from the Minnesota Local Technical Assistance Program. And within that, the Circuit Training and Assistance Program group, they were involved with helping us develop this as well. A couple of the members that were on our field manual rewrite committee were actually members of the Minnesota Committee of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, and that helped quite a bit. Joe Gustafson from Washington County and Tim Plath from the City of Eagan were very helpful with this rewrite, and then we're able to work with the full committee to let them know why we made certain changes and so forth. And so this has been blessed by the full Minnesota Committee of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, and it was, like I said, effective as of late January 2018. One of the big changes in the field manual is that we've got new sections. We've got a section for low volume roads, and we've got a section for two-way left turn lanes. Two-way left turn lanes used to be embedded in with the multi-lane undivided, but there are more and more of these types of roads, and we wanted to highlight that these layouts were there and make them a little bit easier to find, so we pulled them out and we created new layouts for this overall section. The low volume was added per a request from the Local Road Research Board. A research study was done where layouts were looked into, and this was done over the past couple of years, where layouts were looked into, and we were trying to figure out how to make it more easy for smaller townships or cities who really don't have large volumes and only use a couple of layouts to be able to delve into the field manual and pull out the layouts that would really work for them, as opposed to looking through all 89 layouts and identifying what they need to do. So I'll go into a little bit more detail about the low volume layouts as we go through here, but we did add a section for them. Previously, the top tab, which is called General Provisions now, was called Standards and Specs, and we changed it to General Provisions because that just made more sense. Standards and Specs was essentially the whole document. So we felt that it would be a better identifier to have the general provisions listed in the front. And as I go through the modifications, I'll talk about the general provisions first, and then we'll get into the layouts a little bit later. But we've made some significant changes in the general provisions area. So, as I said, we're going to the general provisions, the key changes. This is the MnDOT motto. We've had it for years. We've got many of the truck stations have this posted inside of it. But we felt that it was a good message to have in the field manual, and the Minnesota Committee of Uniform Traffic Control Devices liked it as well, so this is on the inside page of the field manual. One of the big changes is we changed the page numbering in the general provisions area. Previously, it was labeled with Roman numerals, and that was for ease of the previous software package that was used to create the document, but it was very confusing trying to tell people to go to what page when they were using Roman numerals in there. We ended up changing that to an alphanumeric, so instead of I through 30 something or other and the Roman numerals, we changed it to A through, I think, AD. But that's what we've got, is we've went to that. You know, and a little joke that I like to use in here is that Roman numerals, I for one, like Roman numerals, and that's getting at the fact that I represents one. But anyway, that's just my little joke. Yep, we'll just go This is the big change. We think it's going to make it a lot easier for people to recognize what page to go to. And as we go through these general provisions pages, if you happen to have a field manual with you or an electronic copy nearby, I encourage you to go into that and kind of look at some of these changes, because I've identified the page number on the slide itself. So on 6K-K, where it lists out the individual and general responsibilities, how do I say this? Essentially, for the next few slides, where there was a significant change made, it was identified on the slide in the italicized bold font. So there were some minor changes that were made in a couple of the paragraphs under these individual and general responsibilities on 6K-K, but where the big change in it is that we added day and night inspections. There's a couple sentences in there that give more guidance to the contractor or whoever is doing the work of what type of inspections that they need to do. These types of inspections were stated in the full MUT. In fact, a lot of the things that we see that were added into the field manual were in the full MUT, but it was kind of buried in kind of obscure locations. So we wanted to make it more clear and apparent, and for people who are out in the field to be able to see what their responsibilities are. That's why those things were placed in the MUT. So there is more language in the field manual about day and night inspections. And I'll bring it up. That's one of the key ways that we can help make sure our temporary traffic control is safe for both the traveling public and our workers, is that we don't want to get put into the case where we set it up at the beginning and don't really pay attention to it, because things happen. Traffic may behave erratically and we don't necessarily notice it, and we really need to make sure we do good inspections as the project progresses to make sure that the traffic control is doing what it needs to do to keep the workers and the driving public safe. Compliance levels, this is not new, but it's worth kind of bringing up again because it's an important element. In some areas outside of the traffic engineering group, they have a misunderstanding of what should means. The traffic engineers and the people who work with the MnMUT, their understanding of should is that it's a higher level of requirement than what a lot of people take it as. So we're just going to highlight some of these points here. A shall is something that you are required to do. It's a mandatory condition. An example of this is that a stop sign shall be read in an octagonal shape. We're not going to change that at all. It has to be that. A should statement is a guidance statement where you're advised or recommended to do it. To not do it requires engineering judgment. So you would actually need, in a specific instance, look at the situation, apply engineering judgment to determine that we're not going to do this should statement. So it should be your default, but you can go away with it with engineering judgment. And engineering judgment in the field manual and in the MUT itself has a pretty high bar. To exercise engineering judgment can only be exercised by an engineer or by an individual working for an engineer using the standards and procedures set forth by that engineer. So people working at MnDOT for area maintenance engineers and so forth, and ourselves, we can exercise engineering judgment. If there's not an engineer involved in that decision-making process, that it gets a little bit more ambiguous. So our standpoint is that if it's a should statement, it should be done, it's the default, and you would just, if you choose not to do it, there's a reason and engineering judgment is exercised. Now technically, engineering judgment does not require documentation, and that's what the field manual says and that's what the MUT says. The challenge with that is sometimes when things go wrong, you won't know that is something of concern until years later, possibly. If something goes wrong and you're not notified about it and you were involved in the design and 2 years go by and then the lawsuit comes, then you may not remember why that issue was something that you exercised engineering judgment for. So we do recommend that it's worth documenting your engineering judgment decision. It's not required, but it's a useful practice so that you can remember why you made that decision. Now, may statements are optional. They are often used to allow you to do something that is required by a shall or a should statement. There may be a reason why you wouldn't want to do it, and there's language in the MnDOT that says you may opt not to do this for this reason. It's also used to enhance the safety of your work zone. Sometimes you may want to add additional things, and there are options listed in the MnDOT and in the field manual about what you may do in order to improve safety. It's not a requirement at all. It's something that could be added if the conditions are set forth for it. Now, on this slide here are a list of a lot of the new definitions that have been added into the field manual, and I'm going to go through them relatively quickly. If you happen to have a field manual next to you, I would recommend looking at these as I go through them if you wanted to actually see what the language specifically says. But the advance warning following distance, that was formerly just called the following distance in the field manual. That's used in our mobile layouts where you've got vehicles that provide the information to the driver, such as a lane is closed or it's got an arrow board on it, but there's a traffic message to the driver as they're navigating the work zone. And that following distance is set so it's a distance away that the driver can take that information and figure out what they need to do and then execute that maneuver. So there's a certain distance that needs to be followed for them to be able to make those decisions and take the appropriate path. And so really, it is for an advance warning message, and we decided to call it the advance warning following distance because that makes it more clear about what it's for. The alternate pedestrian routes and temporary pedestrian access route, there's formerly in the previous field manual, we had the temporary pedestrian access route, the TPAR, identified as something that ought to be done when you're dealing with pedestrians going through your work zone. Technically, though, a temporary pedestrian access route is fully accessible based on its definition. A pedestrian access route is fully accessible, so a temporary one would also be fully accessible. Work zones require that if you are relocating pedestrians, you need to provide the same level of accessibility that was there before. So where you're taking them to, it does not have to be fully accessible if your previous route was fully accessible. And so we're starting to use that term alternate pedestrian route to indicate another route where you've taken them that meets at least the same level of accessibility that was on the previous route. You may want to bring it up to the TPAR level, depending upon the situation, but you're not required to. And so that's why we've got the alternate pedestrian route highlighted in there as a new definition. We've added some language in the field manual overall related to clear zones and fixed objects and roadside safety. There's a section on roadside safety that I'll talk about in a little bit that'll go a little bit more into detail here, but we really didn't have a definition of clear zone in the field manual. The MnDOT itself requires making sure that roadside safety is a consideration as you're setting up your work zone, but there was no guidance in the field manual on how to do that. So we ended up modifying the definition that's given in the AASHTO Roadside Design Guide, clearing it with the Minnesota Committee of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. We added a table of recommended clear zone distances, and that was added into the field manual. I'll talk about more of that when we get to roadside safety. Deadheading was something that was added. It is a common exercise where you're going from one location where you're doing work to another location where you're doing work, but you may not be going the same speed as the traveling public as you're going from site to site. So this really is, it's to identify the process of going from one location to another, and if you are not going the same speed, if you're going significantly slower than the traveling public or below the posted minimum speed limit, it really should be treated as a mobile operation. And so that was added into the definition of deadheading, is that that should be treated as a mobile operation if you're going significantly slower than the traveling public, so that they can get out of the way or avoid you as you're traveling down the highway. Drivable was added as a definition in here. In the previous couple of versions of the field manual, we kept, if we were going to redirect traffic to go onto the shoulder, there was language in there saying that the shoulder needed to be paved. And that probably needs to be the case for a high-speed road, where you would put them onto a paved shoulder so that there isn't any issue with vehicles going too fast and losing control if they happen to go onto a gravel shoulder. We realize that there are situations on low-speed roads, for instance, or residential roads, or where you don't have adequate shoulder, but drivers can navigate that safely, that based on speed, a drivable surface may be partly paved and have also be gravel. There are also situations where we've got gravel roads out there, and if we're telling you to go onto a paved shoulder that doesn't even exist, well, there's a problem there. We wouldn't want to pave that. So we came up with the definition of drivable, and that's what's in the field manual at this point. A fixed object ties in with the clear zone. It's a hazard that is identified as firm, unyielding, and greater than 4 inches in height. A flashing arrow board. We use flashing arrow boards quite a bit in the field manual, but we didn't really define them either in the field manual or in the MnDOT, so we ended up coming up with a pretty good definition for that so that it's clear what a flashing arrow board is. A lane width. Previously, we said that any lane width has to be at least 10 feet in width. There are some instances in temporary traffic control where you may not be able to achieve that, or you may not have enough width in your road anyway to handle that, and so you can't even get close to that. So we added a little bit of flexibility in here for lane width, that if the road authority gives you permission, you can go less than 10 feet. That's been added into that definition. Pilot car, which is used in flagging operations, we previously didn't have a definition of that in there, but we wanted to make it clear what a pilot car was. So that was added into the definition list. Road authority is mentioned on many layouts, but we didn't specifically say what the road authority is, and so the definition for road authority was added into the field manual to make it clear on who the contractor should contact, or whoever is doing the work, who they should contact. A spotter was added. We talked about spotters a little bit later in additional enhancements to work zones in order to make them a little bit safer. We wanted to make it clear that a spotter is not the same thing as a flagger. A flagger is out there to provide traffic control. A spotter is out there to provide warning to people in case something bad happens or in case there is a vehicle that's out of control. The spotter's there to provide warning to the workers there. And so we added that definition in the field manual, as well as some guidance later on. And the truck and trailer mounted attenuators, we did not have that defined. We talk about TMAs quite a bit in the field manual, but it wasn't defined. So people don't have to go to another document to find out what that is. It was added to the field manual. And all these definitions are located on 6K, B through J. Now on 6K-M, under temporary traffic control enhancements, this has been in the field manual before, but as with previous situations, what has been added on this slide is indicated by the bold italicized font. So in the new field manual, additional personnel was added as a thing that could be a good temporary traffic control enhancement. Spotter, for instance, is one of the things that has been added under the additional personnel. Flaggers have been added in there too, so there might be additional personnel that would be appropriate for certain situations to enhance the safety of a specific work zone. We added the buffer or additional lane closure as an option that could be used to enhance the safety of the temporary traffic control zone. That's defined in there as well. We made it a little bit more clear that closing shoulders or adding protection vehicles could be a good practice depending upon your situation. It's not required, but there are situations in which, say, you might have a merging taper, but for some reason the shoulder might be a very, very wide shoulder, and would there be a temptation for a driver to go onto the shoulder to bypass the area, maybe to get to a driveway? There are many situations where if you've got a wide shoulder, maybe you want to close that shoulder with a shoulder taper, and that's highlighted as something that you can do. In the lighting section, we added sequential lighting. The full MnDOT has sequential lighting in there, and that would be used for a merging taper. So on your merging tapers, on top of the devices, you're not allowed to put flashing warning lights unless they're sequential. And the sequential has a sequential sequence of lights that makes it clear of the direction that the driver should drive as they follow that taper. Basically goes right up the line of those channelizing devices. And that can be very useful at night to help highlight to the driver the path they ought to take as they're approaching a merging taper. Now in the general provisions area, these are not italicized, but all of this is new that was added into the general provisions area. Previously, we just had the installing the traffic control zone, and within that, we had a paragraph that talked about removing devices. There are some elements that we felt were important to add into this group, and so we added a paragraph about inspecting the temporary traffic control zone. I mentioned earlier that that was one of the general requirements. This paragraph here gives you a description of how that can be done. That essentially saying that to provide acceptable levels of operations and to maintain safety, routine day and night inspections of the temporary traffic control zone should be performed and documented by knowledgeable personnel. It just tells you how to do it. And there is a sample project checklist that's actually in the field manual for an example inspection sheet, so you would go to that page. Now, removing the temporary traffic control zone is a new paragraph that was added. As I mentioned before, there was a sentence under installing that talked about removing devices, but based on feedback we received as we went across the state talking to people who removed temporary traffic control zones and installed them, they mentioned a couple of situations, and we felt that it was worth adding some flexibility into this in order to allow the takedown to go a little bit more smoothly. So we added some flexibility in there. Previously, to remove a temporary traffic control zone, the guidance was that you remove the devices in the opposite order of how they were installed. So you would go to the end and you would remove the channel, you would move the end work zone sign, then you would remove the channelizers, then you'd go back to the advanced warning area and remove the third sign, then remove the second sign and the first sign. That gets pretty challenging with the removing the advanced warning signs because those are well ahead of the work area and where you've got the channelizing devices. So if you're working on a freeway where your interchange spacing, you're 5 miles apart from each other, in order to do this, the technically right way from the previous field manual is that you could remove those channelizing devices. Then, if you don't want to back up on the shoulder, which you may not want to, there might be good reasons for that, because you might have to back up 1,000 feet between each of the advanced warning signs. You would then drive ahead to the next interchange, do a U-turn, come back around, and then remove that third sign. Then you'd have to go find that same interchange, go back around and remove that second sign, and so forth. So that's a lot of driving around to remove signs. So we ended up saying that the new option in here is that the advanced warning area, you can remove those signs in the order of that installation. So after you remove the channelizing devices, you can go back around and then remove the first sign, and then the second sign, and then the third sign. And we felt that that time of taking those signs down, it's relatively small, and the risk to the traveling public as they're driving through there is reduced because you have the pickup in a much shorter time frame than you would have had if you're removing the signs in the reverse order. You're also allowed to remove the temporary traffic control zone utilizing a mobile lane closure in the order that it was originally installed, and that can make it much easier to remove the temporary traffic control devices. So those are the additional options that were added for that. Another new guidance statement that was placed in the general provisions on that page 6K-N was crossing live lanes of traffic. We've never really had good guidance on how to do this, and what most people have learned about crossing live lanes of traffic, they may have learned from the experienced maintenance personnel, that you make sure you've got a big enough gap that you could walk across that road safely, because that gives you time to make that move. In other states, contractors have been cited by OSHA for violating the general duty clause because they did require people to cross live lanes of traffic, but we realistically have to do that. We can't do what we do at MnDOT without crossing live lanes of traffic. So working with the Minnesota Committee of Uniform Traffic Control Devices and the safety personnel, we came up with this language talking about how to cross live lanes of traffic, and that personnel may cross live traffic lanes only if it is safe to do so, utilizing a walking pace, taking into consideration roadway geometry, traffic volume, and other appropriate factors. The reason why we wanted to have that in there is because oftentimes people are, if you're walking, you're much less likely to trip. And if you're carrying something like a sign or a box, if you're doing a traffic counting operation, if you're carrying something and you're running, you're even more likely to have issues and maybe stumble. So if you've got enough of a gap that you can walk across safely, we felt that was the best way that you can do that as safe as possible. So that's guidance that's in the field manual now, and it does apply statewide. So I alluded to this earlier, that we've got a new section for roadside safety. It's on page 6K N through O, where we end up talking about what we need to do for roadside safety. Roadside safety is mentioned in the fundamental principles of temporary traffic control in part 6B of the Minnesota MnDOT, but not many people have reviewed that portion of the document. So we wanted to get it into the field manual and make it more clear about how to maintain roadside safety. So one of the key things that is listed in here is that clear zones should be provided where practical. And we had identified what a clear zone is in the definitions page. And we also came up with recommended distances for the clear zones. Now, work zones are areas where people are doing a lot of work, and it may not be practical to provide a clear zone in many instances while you're doing work. And that's acknowledged here because it talks about providing clear zones where practical if you're able to do it. There's another paragraph that talks about where to put work equipment, worker vehicles, materials, and things like that. They should really be stored to reduce the probability of run-off-the-road vehicles hitting them. And so that was taken directly out of that Part 6B. We just wanted to make that clear, that things like this should be out of the way so that they're not hit by out-of-control vehicles. Now, in urban areas, it's going to be very difficult to meet that clear zone distance table that we have, that table 6K-1. So we took something from state aid that talks about lateral offset to obstruction. So if you've got a curbed area, if you've got an urban area that has curb, the lateral offset to obstruction of 1.5 feet is what you should try to achieve for a clear area. It's not called a clear zone necessarily, but a lateral offset to obstruction is what you should try to achieve if you've got work going on. And in all cases, whether it's a rural or an urban section, when work is not active, there's guidance in the field manual that states that hazards or fixed objects should not be in the clear zone or within that lateral offset to obstruction, again, depending upon the road environment when work is not active. If it's not practical to move whatever it is that might be in the way, shield it. If it's not practical to shield it, so if you've got a crane out there and that's the only place that you can store it, and you're only out there for a day or two and it's not practical to have a traffic control operation to put out barrier, then you can do something else. If it's not practical to shield it, then you can delineate it. So there is a method here of, and it's similar to general roadside safety. If there's something out there that's a hazard, remove it. If you can't do that, shield it. If you can't do that, delineate it. We're following something similar in the temporary traffic control zones. Another couple paragraph, or another section that was added in the general provisions area is talking about marking hazards. This was in a portion of Part 6 that was kind of buried in an obscure location that not many people knew where it was, and we wanted to bring it to the forefront because it's an issue out there. The guidance essentially states that when infrastructure gets damaged, so if a guardrail gets hit, that needs to be repaired as soon as possible. And MnDOT does that. Other agencies do that. They look at what personnel are available to fix things, and then they put it in a queue, and then they work on trying to get to that point. So it's repaired as soon as possible. But until that repair is possible, you need to mark that damaged infrastructure, that hazard, with a Type 1 or Type 2 barricade. Either one of those has to have a flashing warning light, or you can use a drum to highlight that. Now, if it's a short-term emergency, so a supervisor is out there, they don't happen to have a drum, they can use a cone to mark it for a short-term emergency. But as soon as you can, it should be, someone should go back out there and put a drum or a barricade out there to help mark that hazard until it's been able to be repaired. Another element that went into this is structures that are above grade. So this is for like a milling operation, where milling work was done, but the manhole covers are peaking up above that surface now. Many of us, I'm sure, have had the situation where we're driving through a milled area and then all of a sudden, bam, we happen to hit that manhole cover because you didn't see it. And so there's language in here about making that apparent. We didn't want to call it a hazard because we've already said just previous to that you need to mark a hazard with a barricade, and we can't do that in all these types of situations. So when we're talking about making it apparent, that we're leaving it up to the field personnel to how to do that, but it could be something as simple as painting it so you can see it and are able to avoid it. So structures above grade, you need to make them apparent. Within the general provisions area, we've got a section on temporary traffic control devices, and this was modified pretty significantly. We reorganized it. Previously, the crash-worthy care requirement was towards the end, and you'd have to read through a bunch of different things before actually getting to that part. And that's one of the key things about temporary traffic control devices, that we want to make sure that they're crash-worthy. So we moved the crash-worthy requirement to the beginning to make it clear that they have to be crash-worthy. Now, there are some devices that are not crash-worthy. We call them Category 4 devices, and those are things like portable changeable message signs or arrow boards that are on trailers, and the benefit that they provide is greater than the hazard that they give to the driving public. But we still need to delineate them. So we do talk about crash-worthy requirements, and then for trailer-mounted devices, we do need to delineate those, and it tells you to go to Layout 7 to actually do that. I'll talk about high-vis clothing in the next area. It's just after mounted devices in the field manual, but I'll talk about that next because I wanted to cover these couple things areas. No changes were made to the flashing warning lights, but the vehicle warning lights, we talked about the requirement for vehicle warning lights in the previous field manual, but we never really gave what the criteria for them ought to be. And so MnDOT has had this criteria for vehicle warning lights for a couple decades, at least a decade. And the Minnesota committee liked this language, and so we adopted it for the overall field manual, that vehicle warning lights need to be visible 360 degrees around the vehicle at a minimum height of 3.5 feet, which is the driver's height when they're sitting in a car generally, and a radius of 60 feet or greater. So this gives you clarity about where the vehicle warning lights need to be. So a single beacon may not be appropriate depending upon the height of the vehicle. You may need to have more than one light on the vehicle in order to meet this. But it's crucial that people be able to see that vehicle, and that's what that warning light is for. So a big change for the high-vis clothing. The previous field manual and the Minnesota Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices only had listed one of the ANSI standards, and there have been 2 updates to the ANSI high-vis standard since the MnDOT was first lately published. So we've added the additional ANSI standards that can be followed, and in all cases, it's class 2 or 3 that you would need to have. One change that will impact pretty much all local agencies, it won't impact MnDOT because this has been our standard for a while, but local agencies will need to be aware of this, is that flaggers are going to need to have the high-vis vest, high-vis pants, and a hat at all times. Prior to this, it was only required at night, but now they're going to need it at all times, and that's to really make the flagger more apparent. They're one of the most vulnerable people that are in a work zone. They're right at the front there, and we want to make it very visible for them to be able to be seen. So that is a big change to the high-vis clothing requirements. One thing that was in the MnDOT, but a lot of people didn't realize this, is that high-vis hat should be worn if a hard hat is not required. And that is if you're exposed to traffic and you've got a high-vis vest on, you really need to have a high-vis hat. Again, that was a previous requirement, but it was in the full manual, but a lot of people did not realize that, and so we added it to the field manual to make it more clear and more visible. Pun intended. Now for the channelizing devices, we had previously had the channelizers with less information on the page, and so it was actually below the table for the distances in the field manual. We added more guidance into this, and what's circled here with that kind of weird square are the things that we added as far as languages for more guidance related to channelizers. A big one is where the orange diagonals need to slope down to. A lot of people didn't realize this. It's been a well-known standard, we feel, but new people didn't know about this, is that when you put out barricades and vertical panels, things like that, that the orange diagonals slope down toward the traffic side. And oftentimes we'll see the barricades out there that are facing the wrong direction. And so we just wanted to make it clear in the field manual how you need to place the devices for that. Weighted channelizers can be used in lieu of a Type B channelizer with the permission of the road authority. Generally, if it's going to be unattended, it should be a Type B channelizing device. These are the types of Type B channelizing devices that you see on the page right now. But cones are Type A channelizing devices, and weighted channelizers are as well. But there are certain situations in which a weighted channelizer may be a good option instead of a drum. If you've got tight geometry that you're driving or that you're controlling traffic to go around, or if you've got access points around which drums would cause a sight hazard for people to be able to get out of that location, you can use these weighted channelizers. So we're just letting people know that that's an option with the permission of the road authority. And we also added guidance in here about the type A flashing warning lights, where those ought to be located. They need to be on the same side of the barricade as traffic. Now, that language and the orange diagonals was also added to the type B channelizer list that's on here as well. Some additional guidance under the type B channelizers on the page is how much of the slats across can be covered with other signs. So type 3 channelizers have the 3 boards with the orange diagonals on them, and you can only cover a certain percentage of them with other signs such as road closed or detours or things like that. And there's criteria that's listed on that page that was not on that page before either. Just wanted to bring that up too. The biggest change in the work zone signing section is a requirement for having detectable edges around portable sign stands. If a portable sign stand, previous to this, the MUT did clearly say that you can't put a portable sign stand in an area where a pedestrian can trip over it. It just says you can't do it. We know that there are situations where we need to do that, but we want to make it so it's not a hazard for pedestrians with visual disabilities. And so the requirement is that if you do place it in a pedestrian walkway where it could be a hazard to a visually impaired pedestrian, it should have a detectable edge around it to guide the pedestrian around the hazard. Now, a detectable edge, by definition, and it's in the MUT under our TPAR devices page, but a detectable edge has to be 6 inches off of the ground, and you're allowed up to 2 inches underneath it for drainage purposes, and it needs to be a contrasting color from the pavement around it. So those are some of the criteria to be aware of, and the notes will actually state that on 6K-U. The sign codes quick reference is a great chart we had initiated in the last field manual where we tried to put more common signs in there so people could know, I need W5-1s, and you'd be able to see what the sign code actually is depending upon the type of sign that you need. We decided to make sure that the field manual included all the sign codes that would be in the field manual, so we added a lot more in here. We also made sure that the official name of the sign, if it's not a named sign, so like the road narrow sign has that name, that word on it, so we know that's a road narrow sign. But the R4-2 is a lane end sign. So the ones that didn't have the words on it, we put the official name from the MUT on this document as well to make it more clear what that document or what that sign is. Under the PCMSs, we ended up modifying the requirements for the Type B portable changeable message signs. Now there are 3 different sizes of PCMSs that can be used out there. The Type A signs are meant for emergency responders and are only meant to provide incident management information, and those can be as little as 10 inches high. But the MUT is clear that anything on a high-speed road, which is defined as 45 miles an hour or greater, the font size or the size of the letters needs to be 18 inches high. And so the Type B PCMS, we've modified that so that that's the requirement. If it's used on a road of 45 miles an hour or greater, the font needs to be 18 inches high. In order to accomplish that, because it's a smaller board, we allow the number of characters per line to be reduced to 5. Many of the PCMSs out there use 8 as a default for what the length of the letters are. But we worked really hard, and listed in here it talks about the allowed abbreviations. We tried to get pretty much all the abbreviations down to 5 characters or less in order to accommodate this. So just something to be aware of for the Type B signs. We still need to have an 18-inch high font, but you can go down to 5 characters in order to do that. New in the field manual is we added a lot more abbreviations. The previous field manual had the abbreviations that are allowed to be used on a portable changeable message sign, but there are also abbreviations that can be used on any sign. And it wasn't clear because we just had that one table in the previous field manual. So we've updated the table in the field manual to include all the abbreviations that can be used on a PCMS. These are the ones that can be used only on a PCMS, and these are the ones that can be used on all signs. They were pushed together into one table, and you're able to see that in the field manual. And I think it's about 3 pages long. We also have a table in there of abbreviations that are specifically not allowed by the MUT. And we just needed to make that clear so that when field personnel are programming these signs to have messages, these are the allowed messages to have. There was a change made to the mobile operation, the mobile temporary traffic control zone. Previous to this type of situation, the roll-ahead distance between, the distance between the protection vehicle and the shadow vehicle was f/2. And it's because it was related to the following distance. After some thought and after a lot of discussions back and forth, we decided that to make it a little bit more clear that really the distance between the shadow vehicle and the protection vehicle, the roll-ahead distance is the appropriate distance to use for that application instead of f/2. We had following distance defined as f, but what is f/2? Is half the following distance, and why is that better than something else? So in our discussion, we decided that the roll-ahead distance is the appropriate distance to have between the shadow vehicle and the protection vehicle, and that's a big change that was made to the mobile layouts, and that's reflected on all of our mobile layouts throughout the document. One of the big changes that was one of the big changes that was made to the temporary traffic control distance charts was the advanced warning sign spacing on on speeds of 30 miles an hour or less. Prior to this, I believe this was 275, and in urban areas where you've got tight blocks some blocks that are only 600 feet long, once you start putting out the advanced warning sign spacing at that large distance, you covered up an entire block with just the signs, and it doesn't really help guide the traffic very well. The federal MUT allows down to 100 feet, and so we ended up modifying our guidance down to 100 feet in order to meet more urban type situations. This can be a little bit longer to meet what your needs are out there, but you can go down to 100 feet, and this is important for urban areas as you're putting out your signs and the advanced warning sign spacing. Another change that was made to the temporary traffic control distance charts is that the area that's kind of highlighted with that square was added. Previous to this, we just had the recommended spacing for the roll-ahead distance with those values out there. But there is an acknowledgement that if you have the heavier vehicles, that roll-ahead distance can be reduced. And we ended up looking through some federal guidance and then adding that language into this table here to make it so that the vehicle can be a little bit closer to the work, because you want to have separation from the workers and the vehicle, because when the vehicle gets hit, it will move. But with a heavier vehicle, it will move less. And so this allows the roll-ahead distance to be reduced, and you can get a little bit closer to the workers ahead of you if you're in a mobile operation. Another key point that we put out here is that shadow and protection vehicle wheels should be pointed straight ahead. When these tests are done for these protection vehicles that have the trailer and truck-mounted attenuators on them, they are tested with the wheels pointing straight ahead. And so if you're not on a curve and you're in a tangent section, the best practice is to have the wheels pointed straight ahead so that when you get hit, you just move straight ahead. If you end up getting hit and the wheels are turned, A, we don't really know what is going to happen with the vehicle, and the TMA may not operate as it was originally designed, so that could be problematic. And B, depending upon where those wheels are turned, you can get pushed into traffic or across the center line. You could have issues with that. So the general guidance is that the wheel should be pointed straight ahead. If you're on a slight curve, maybe it might be a good idea to match up with the center line a little bit, but we recommend not having a hard turn to the vehicle that's acting as a protection or a shadow vehicle. Now that was just the changes that was in the general provisions area. Now I'm going to go into the layouts and see what the key changes to the layouts are. Now I'm not going to be able to cover all of the changes. I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, but no layout went unscathed. every layout we spent a lot of time on. The committee that was evaluating, the task force that was created in order to do this, spent a lot of time on this, and every layout had modifications. Another thing to be aware of is none of the layout numbers are the same as what they were before. So if you had a known layout that you would go to all the time, I think 14 was the bread and butter flagging layout. Well, that's no longer the bread and butter flagging layout. I think it's layout 16 now, and I'll talk about that as we go through it. But just be aware of that. One of the big changes that we made throughout the document, and we think this is a great change, is that we went to specific versus general notes. We previously had the notes listed by numbers, and some of the numbers were listed on the picture itself, but it wasn't clear which ones were specific and which were general. We now have standardized that. So a specific note, if it's got a circle around it, look to the drawing to see what that's actually referring to. It's a general note, it applies overall. So for this layout that's being represented on here, the general note is that any vehicle not displaying a flashing arrow board shall display high intensity rotating, flashing, oscillating, or strobe lights. The other ones are specific notes, and then you would look specifically to the picture to see what they apply to. The new section that was added, as I mentioned earlier, for low volume, one of the key elements to this is that, how do I put this? Is that if you've got a low volume road, especially if it's a low speed road, you may not need to have the amount of devices that we had previously expected to have out there. The field manual, since it was developed by MnDOT, and yes, it's approved by the Minnesota Committee of the Uniform Traffic Control Devices, was kind of highway-centric. It was conservative. And so a lot of the devices that were placed out there had the expectation that you're going to have high-speed traffic, and that's going to happen many, many times. But there are lower-speed roads in which you may not need to have as many traffic control devices. And so the full MUT, there's a Part 5 section that talks about low-volume roads, and within it, it talks about how you can reduce the number of devices in the appropriate applications if you've got low volumes, especially if you've got low-speed roads. So this new section on low-volume roads ends up having elements where you can have fewer devices out there in the right applications, and I'll talk about some of them as we go through here. In addition, we have a couple of indexes in this section. So we've got the typical index that people would use to find the layout to use for whatever activity that they're doing. But this low volume is going to be used a little bit more by townships and others where they don't have as many layouts that they need to be aware of. And so instead of looking at the impact of what lane needs to be taken and what the length of it needs to be, instead we're looking at what the maintenance activity is and what's an appropriate layout for that maintenance activity. And this was developed with the help of the local road research board, identifying specific maintenance activities and the appropriate layouts for it to make it a little bit easier for townships that only have to use a couple of these in order to dig into just these layouts a little bit more easily. As I mentioned earlier, these low volume layouts, in many cases, you can have a reduced number of devices, and again, that's allowed by both Parts 5 and 6 of the Minnesota Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. And here's a prime example of this. So if you're doing work on center line, this is showing quite a few devices, and this is what we would typically like to see out there, but because it's in the low volume area, this is for roads less than 480 T and speed limits of 30 miles an hour or less. See specific note number 3, where it talks about how the channelizers and the road work ahead signs are optional if you're out there for 15 minutes or less. So that normally for work on center line, if you're out there for up to 12 hours, that's what it means on the bottom left corner, what the duration of the general, what the duration of the layout is appropriate for. If you're out there for less than 15 minutes, you wouldn't need to put out the channelizing devices or the road work ahead signs. You would just have a vehicle with a rotating beacon on it, and that could be very appropriate in a residential street where you don't have a lot of traffic or a lot of volume. And we think that that was appropriate too. The Minnesota Committee felt that was appropriate as well. And so in many of these low volume layouts, we've reduced the number of devices because of that acknowledgement that the character of people driving in those areas is different than if they're driving on a high-speed roadway. Again, all these were reviewed and approved by the Minnesota Committee of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, and reducing the number of devices is particularly on the roads that had less speeds of equal to or less than 30 miles per hour. A brand new layout that was added is a road closure for special events. Now the MUT up to recently, and I say very recently because of the field manual change here, in order to close a road, the MUT is clear that you can only do that with type 3 barricades across the entire width of the roadway with the road closed sign on top of that. And we've all been to block parties or parades or things like that where they're just using type 1 barricades. And technically, per the MUT, the federal MUT, and the Minnesota MUT prior to this, that wasn't appropriate. If you're closing a road, you need to use the massive barricades and across the entire width. So we ended up coming up with new language for Part 6F, that allows the Type 1 and Type 2 barricades to close roads for special events, such as parades or block parties or things of that nature. And we ended up creating this layout in order to match that new language that's been added in there. So in Minnesota, we are now allowed to use the Type 1 or Type 2 barricades to close roads. Previously, technically, that was not allowed. Now this layout was added into the field manual. So under the 2-lane, 2-way section, we added this layout about a work vehicle parked on shoulder. Now layout 8 talks about shoulder closed or parking lane closed. And technically, if you would have read all of the paragraphs in the notes, you could do what's shown on this diagram, but we really wanted to simplify it. So if a person's going out for a field walk, they're going out checking out a culvert or something of that nature where they can park off the side of the road, or if a traffic counter is going out there, they can park off on the side of the road without being in the way of traffic. They can just park the vehicle with the rotating beacon on, and they can be up there for up to an hour. So this was allowed by the shoulder closure layout before, but it was there was a lot you had to take in to actually get down to this. So we wanted to make it more clear that you can, in certain situations, you can just park the work vehicle on the shoulder, just have your rotating beacon, and you can do work in that particular area. So that's why this layout was created. The flagging layouts, what we ended up doing with these is, I mentioned earlier that the typical flagging layout used to be layout 14. Again, the new layout is 16, so remember that one. So this is the new flagging layout to follow. What we ended up doing is we moved all the flagging related layouts into the 2-lane, 2-way area. The flagging crossroads and blind curves, which is now layout 19, and the flagging stations options, which was now layout 23, those used to be in the miscellaneous layouts section of the field manual. We wanted to pull them all together to get all the flagging stuff together to make it easier to find, and that's why we ended up doing that. A big change that occurred on this layout, though, is that in the previous case, the distance between the downstream flagger taper to the flagger was 50 feet. But we've seen situations and heard of situations in where a vehicle navigating this, especially if it's a large truck, it's hard for them to make this move back if they've only got 50 feet between this downstream taper and where the flagger is. In many cases, the flagger was moving down in order to have a greater comfort level. So we ended up modifying this distance between the end of the downstream taper to the flagger to 100 feet, and that applies to all of the flagging layouts, including the AFAD layout. If you're flagging near a railroad, we added a couple of additional things into this layout. This layout existed previously, but a couple of things we wanted to make sure that people did is that note number 1 talks about users of this layout shall coordinate with the railroad. That is absolutely required, and we wanted to make that very clear. And the other thing is that in consultation with the railroad office within MnDOT and their experience working with the railroads, there are criteria that the channelizing devices can't be any closer than 8 feet on either side of the railroad track. So that's generally for railroads. We found out today that LRT requires 10 feet. So again, that's another reason why you need to coordinate with the railroad to verify certain things like that. So portable signals, that's a pseudo flagging operation. We're using signals instead of a flagger, but we made a pretty big change to this because of the situation where this signal might be green. And if the signal is green and traffic is traveling at a relative high speed. They won't be going their full speed, but they could be going at a relative higher speed of traffic, a relatively higher speed. This 50-foot taper is difficult for them to make that maneuver. So on the portable signals, we modified both this taper and the downstream taper to be L/2. So that's a shifting taper distance that we're using there as opposed to the 50 foot. So that's a pretty big change that was made to the portable signals. Some additional layouts that were moved to the two-lane, two-way area away from other areas. Most of these were in the miscellaneous layouts before. Gravel road maintenance, that's layout 3030, was moved into this area because that really is more two-lane, two-way situations. Temporary road closure was moved to this area as well, as was regular road closure. The crossroad and confirmation signing area section or layout was moved into this area too, just to bring all these things closer together so people have an easier time finding these various layouts. The turn lane closures were previously in the two-lane, two-way, but I just wanted to point out that they're still in this area. They're not moved, but if you've got turn lanes on divided highways or undivided roads, those turn lanes closure layouts are found in the two-lane, two-way area. So another new section that was added was a two-way left turn lane, the two-way continuous left turn lane section. I call them twiddles. For me, it's a little bit easier to say, but it's a brand new section. We pulled these layouts from the undivided multi-lane and added new layouts to it, and because we're seeing more and more of these types of roads. This pic is actually kind of cool because it shows one of the brand new layouts. That's on the next slide, the layout itself, but here's a pic of what it looks like. This is the two-way left turn lane mobile lane closure. So if you're closing the two-way left turn lane section to maybe put in arrows, maybe you need to refresh the arrows in that turn lane, this is a layout that you can now use for it. You've got the work vehicle, you've got the protection vehicle on this side, and you've got a protection vehicle on the opposite side that's facing this way. And again, it's facing this way because the vehicles are required to have the truck-mounted attenuators on them, the TMAs. So if someone hits this, it hits the TMA. If you didn't have this vehicle facing this direction, they would hit the front of the vehicle. So here's that mobile short duration layout if you're closing the two-way left turn lane in this type of section. One thing to quickly mention about this overall situation is that all the mobile layouts that were in the field manual before, we've now converted to mobile short duration layouts. So mobile layouts are meant to be used for up to 15 minutes. Short duration are layouts that are meant to be used up to an hour. And we had previously had a lot of requests to open up the mobile layout duration. Instead of 15 minutes, can we use 20? Can we use 25? And there's a reason why we chose 15 for that, and why we separate mobile and short duration. Short duration is a longer time frame. Workers are more exposed. Drivers need more guidance in order to get around that area. So there's a difference between these two. What we ended up deciding is actually combining them into the same layout, but if you're going to go beyond 15 minutes, you need to provide additional devices. For this layout itself, for the mobile short duration lane closure on the continuous left turn lane, note number 2 is the important one to look at it. Channelizers may be omitted if the operation moves at least a decision site distance every 15 minutes. So the channelizing devices are between the protection vehicle and the work vehicle, and in all the mobile layouts, if you want to expand them out to short duration, you would at least need to add the channelizing devices. And this provides a lot more positive guidance for drivers that are navigating this so that they don't cut into the work area past a protection vehicle. The channelizing devices really direct the drivers to go around that area, and that improves the safety for the workers. So just something to be aware of. All the mobile layouts can now be used for short duration if you have additional devices. And for sure, at least, you need to have the channelizing devices between the protection vehicle and the work vehicle, and some of the layouts require additional warning signs on the side of the road prior. And in this case, I kind of mentioned this before, the protection vehicle on the, let's call it the, well, at the top of the layout is facing the work vehicle, but that's because the TMA is for the traffic that might hit it. Here is a layout that was added at a request from one of our task force members. It's a brand new layout, but the reason I'm highlighting it in here is that it shows the issue between the merging taper and the shifting taper. Previous to this layout, and actually for the past, since 1972, we could do a merging taper where you're taking 2 lanes of traffic and having it merge into 1 lane, and that would have a arrow board at the beginning, or a Type 3 barricade with a one direction large arrow. Here's what that looks like. You would have a Type 3 barricade with a one direction large arrow. That would have to be at the begin. That or the arrow board would be at the beginning of the taper, and then you'd have the Type 3 barricade with the one direction large arrow at the end of the taper. That's what we've done for decades. Turns out we can't do that per language in another portion of the MUT. The one direction large arrow is meant only to be used if you're having a change in horizontal alignment. So if you've got a curve, that's when you have to use the one direction large arrow. And there's a concern that countrywide that if we started allowing the use of the one direction large arrow for not that situation, that there would be confusion. Say someone from another part of the country that only sees that one direction large arrow being used for horizontal curves, they wouldn't know what it means in a merging taper. So because of that, we had to modify how we do our merging tapers. And the decision was made, I mean, we felt that we needed to have an arrow at the beginning of the merging taper, so we're either using the arrow board or on a low speed situation, 40 miles an hour or less, you put the merge with arrow sign at the beginning of the taper. At the end of the taper, you've got the Type 3 barricade, which we feel is important because it blocks off that area. And if these channelizing devices get knocked down, we want people to see this as a barrier that they really can't pass, a barricade that they can't pass. But we wanted to put a lane closed sign on top of it, to provide more area for the more signage for a person to see as they're approaching that. In addition, because that's a black and white regulatory sign, it really makes it clear that that lane is closed and drivers can't go into that area. So granted, we can't use a one direction large arrow anymore, but we feel that this is a good substitution for how we do our merging tapers. This layout shows a merging taper followed by a shifting taper. So we can still use the one direction large arrow for shifting tapers, and that's why I wanted to highlight this one. So here's the merging taper, typical situation that we use now, and the shifting taper where they are having a change in horizontal alignment in order to navigate that. That's why we're using the one direction large arrow on that. So here's a picture of the new merging taper in real life. So this is a lower speed road. You can see the speed limit sign up there. So it's 40 miles an hour or less. So we're not required to have a flashing arrow board. And in that case, we can put the merge with arrow sign prior to it. And at the end of it, we've got the Type 3 barricade with the lane closed sign on it. This is the new merging taper. On a lot of our layouts, we've added some additional positive guidance as you come into the work zone. So for this type of application, and you're going to see it on some of the other layouts too, we've added channelizing devices with an optional keep right sign at the beginning of the work zone or at the beginning of the channelizing to give drivers better guidance on how to navigate the work zone and how to get through it. And so I just wanted to let you know that that's out there, so as you look at your layouts, you may notice these additional channelizers. The intent is for greater positive guidance to guide drivers through that work zone. With this version of the field manual, we've got the first layout with an inset. So we've got a green box indicating an inset. So for this would be a left lane closure. If you did not want to allow left turns, you could put up these no left or no left and U-turn signs at that location. If you were to allow left turns from this lane, you would not have these signs. If you wanted to have a dedicated lane to allow people to make turns, you can use what's in this inset here. And so in order to allow that, we've got 2 signs that need to be in this taper area. You've got the turn lane sign for the people approaching it to be aware that they have to go that direction. And you've got the left lane must turn left sign. Because this is 3 days or less, we're not going to make pavement marking changes usually. And so we're not going to have arrows in here, but there needs to be something in here to make it clear to drivers when they enter this that they can't cheat and bypass it. Maybe someone's turning right here and they don't want to have to wait for them, and so they get in this lane and then they try to merge up in this area, and then you can have a merging conflict occur within the intersection itself. So This makes it regulatory that they have to make a left turn from that lane. So once they're in the lane, they have to turn left. This lets them know to go into that lane to make that left turn. With many of the road closure layouts, we made a pretty big modification. Previous to this, if you had a temporary road closure that was meant to last 13 minutes or 15 minutes or less using flaggers, that's what it would say at the bottom here, is it would say 15 minutes or less. We came to a realization with these that some of these require a lot of devices. We've also got ones that are more mobile and short duration type. So really setting up the work zone for the road closure, we don't want to delay the traffic for more than 15 minutes at a time, and that's appropriate, and that's what the flaggers would control them for, but the layout itself can be out there for a longer period of time. And so for this temporary road closure on a multi-lane undivided road, it can be set up for 12 hours or less, but based on note number 2, traffic should not be stopped for intervals greater than 15 minutes. So any of these temporary road closures that you see in the field manual that show flaggers, we've got that note in there, but the duration can be different depending upon its application. So on the multi-lane divided road, I'll go into that area pretty quick here. A big change that was made to this is a brand new layout for a multi-lane closure that's a mobile and short duration. So this is using vehicles to communicate to the traveling public that they need to merge over in order to get into a single lane in order to bypass this area. This layout has been used, well, I don't want to say the layout has been used. The practice has been out there, and it's been used by metro maintenance night crews if they're doing work out there and they're only out there for a short period of time. This, again, is a mobile/short duration multi-lane closure. So it's mobile, meaning it would normally be used for up to 15 minutes, but we expanded it to short duration because they need to have the channelizing devices. So again, the channelizing devices may be omitted if the operation moves at least the decision site distance every 15 minutes. So you can get away with not having the channelizing devices 15 minutes or less, but up to an hour you need to have those channelizing devices. But this would be a useful one for someone if they had to replace a plaque on an overhead sign structure and they didn't really want to set up, if they didn't have the opportunity, because setting up a work zone takes a pretty big period of time, and in it itself is a mobile operation with how Metro does it, and so that adds additional issues and reduction in the, how do I put this? It reduces the mobility and the safety for the traveling public, even setting up work zones. So for these short duration ones, there is a safety benefit for using just vehicles in order to do it, and so we wanted to add this as a possibility for how they can do this type of lane closure. I mentioned earlier that we talked about there are different types of road closures out there. Here is one of the mobile short duration road closures. So on a divided road, you can use the vehicles with the appropriate messaging to do the reduce the traffic down to a single lane, and then you would have the flagger stop the traffic for up to 15 minutes. This was partially created because we had a lot of requests for the rolling roadblock, where in other states law enforcement is used to slow traffic down, very slow as they go through a particular area, and hopefully there's enough time for people to do work up ahead of that area. In Minnesota, we're uncomfortable with that. The Minnesota Committee of Uniform Traffic Control Devices is uncomfortable with that. So this is our option to use instead of that rolling roadblock. We would do a mobile short duration road closure for it. There is a longer term version that can be used up to 12 hours, but that's layout 73, and that actually uses the channelizing devices similar to what you saw on that undivided one. Here is our more bread and butter lane closure. As I mentioned before, the one direction large arrow can no longer be used for the merging tapers, so this is what this area looks like. One thing I'll quickly point out about the placement of the arrow board, and you'll see that in note number 1 here. If you're on a higher speed road and you're required to use that flashing arrow board, 45 miles an hour or greater, that's what's stated up here, the flashing arrow board shall be used where the posted speed limit is 45 miles an hour or greater, and shall be placed on the shoulder. If it can't fit on the shoulder, so if it's a left shoulder, you may not have much of a shoulder here, or the shoulder is too narrow, you need to place the arrow board at the end of the taper in lieu of the Type 3 barricade. There have been situations where we've seen it installed in here, and per the federal MUT, there can be nothing in the taper itself. So the flashing arrow board needs to be placed at the end of the taper if you don't have enough shoulder, just to kind of point that out and let people be aware of that. On the lane closure extension layout, we've had this previously. We've added the option where they can use cones in certain situations. So see specific note 4. So if the temporary traffic control zone is installed for less than 12 hours or is attended, they can have their channelizing devices along the lane line here, but then every 1,000 feet or so, depending upon the distance, you've got 500 feet or 1,000, depending upon where the work is actually occurring, you need to have a Type 3 barricade to really make it clear to the drivers as they're going through here that they can't go into that lane. There are situations, if it's going to be an intended work zone, where the vehicles that come out there, they only have the cones. They don't have, they would have to mobilize another vehicle to bring out the Type 3 barricades or the drums. And we felt that it was safe enough if it's an intended work zone, or if it's short enough time that they can just use cones to do that lane closure. That's just a modification that was made to this layout. There was a pretty significant change to this one. This is what is used a lot of times to change a signal head. The previous layout had nothing prior to this. It just had the work vehicle with the channelizing devices around it. And there was a statement up here saying that the traffic control signal should be put in all red flash mode. Our concern was that is that if it's not put in all red flash mode, there might be a green light here. And because it's a should statement, generally the recommendation is to go to that, but there might be an engineering judgment why you could go away from putting it into an all red flash mode. Then you've got a very vulnerable situation with a person up here in a bucket truck. So as we put this together, long conversations were had on it, we decided that the statement ought to say what's up here, that you may omit the protection vehicle when the signal is placed in all red flash mode. The channelizing devices may be omitted if you've got a protection vehicle here with the TMA. So a couple things in this is that when people are coming up through this, I mean, even if it's in all red flash mode, we want people to merge over into a single lane so they're not trying to merge as they're coming into this intersection here. So the channelizing devices are necessary to move traffic into a single lane before they go through that area. If it's not in all red flash mode, you need to have that protection vehicle to provide protection for that work vehicle. So that's a pretty big change that was made to this layout. This is a brand new layout that was added. We're seeing this more often where you've got an interchange and you want to close the entrance ramp going down to the freeway or the limited access road, and this is how you would end up doing it. This makes it more easily seen, and so we didn't need to have people develop a temporary traffic control plan specifically for this application. It's happening often enough that we felt it was useful to add into the field manual. Now, we've previously seen a layout where you closed the layout, you end up closing a lane past, well, we may not have seen it. We didn't spend much time on it, actually. But if you've got a situation where you're closing a lane after an intersection, you close a lane prior to it, and then you have traffic going through there. But if you've got a dual right coming into it or a dual left coming into it, we're saying that you really should close one of those lanes in order to make it so that when the traffic comes into it, it's only a single lane of traffic that's coming into it, and they're not trying to merge as they're approaching that work zone. And because if someone's not letting someone else in, where else can they go? So that's the challenge here. So this is the layout that was developed for it. And note that in both cases, whether it's a left turn or a right turn, the furthest turn lane is the one that's closed. It's so much easier to do it that way, to just extend the channelizing devices up here, as opposed to having a taper, channelizing devices, and additional signs up here directing people into this lane. It's just so much easier to just close the outside lane and then have traffic go through there. So miscellaneous layouts, we're getting to 3:20 right now, so I'm going to quickly talk about a couple of these things and then have some time available for questions. The layout for the typical dip and bump signing has been modified. The language in the MUT has been modified pretty significantly in order to accommodate this. When it was originally rewritten based on the federal language. Some aspects were missing, so we had to rewrite it. Anyway, this is the new layout for the bump and dip signing. Controlled burn was another layout that was added based on requests, and so that's in there just to be aware of it. We added the workers present speed limit layout in here because under certain application or certain criteria, it's required by law now. So there are certain situations in which you have to put a workers present speed limit out there. If your work is greater than 24 hours and you're taking a lane and workers are present in that adjacent lane, you're required to put up a workers present speed limit. We are telling whoever is working on it that they have to contact the road authority for those requirements, but this is the layout that they ought to be using when they're setting up a workers present speed limit. We added a layout for a bike lane closure for a couple of reasons. There's a Minnesota statute that only allows vehicles to cross bike lane lines to park or turn right. If you happen to have a job downstream of here, for some reason you need to send traffic into that bike lane, you can't have done that unless you closed the bike lane. So this layout is to be used when you're working in the bike lane, or General Note 1. Use this layout when work is occurring in the bike lane or traffic is to be diverted into the bicycle lane downstream. The APR layouts didn't change too much. One change we made is that we made these audible message devices symbols a little bit different, not a major thing. The key thing to bring up is General Note 2. There is language in the MnDOT that allows the case that if it's an attended work zone and workers are present to move things out of the way, you don't necessarily need to set up an alternate pedestrian route to guide pedestrians around that area. Granted, if you've got a lot of pedestrians working in downtown Minneapolis or St. Paul, you may still want to set up an alternate pedestrian route, but this gives you the flexibility to not do that. If the work zone is unattended at any time, or if it lasts longer than one work shift, you need to have an alternate pedestrian route. But if you're just there for a little bit of time, this means that you can get there, work without having to set up an alternate route, and then as long as people are there, you can move things out of the way to let the pedestrian go through. The Minnesota Flagging Handbook was modified in a couple of different areas. We made the language around this flagging a signalized intersection a little bit more clear. It has to be a law enforcement personnel that works with operating a signal that's going through the red, green, yellow, red, yellow, green mode overall. So that's a little bit more clear. But we also, the hand signaling devices, we wanted to show how to use the hand signaling devices. Before, we just had a couple of these situations out there. It was just the flag and the paddle. There are situations where you can use a flashlight with red glow cone, and this shows you how to control traffic through these pictures. Plus, there is a Flagger Train the Trainer certification card that is in the field manual. It's in the flagging handbook. This can be filled out to show that a flagger has been trained appropriately. So I can just go to questions now, and I will minimize the screen. Escape. There we go. And open up the Skype session. So Gene ended up writing a question: does MnDOT have an agreement to do traffic control on local roads, or do the locals need to get involved? So MnDOT is responsible for the state highway system. There are projects in which their state aid gets involved, and there might be related work between MnDOT state highways and local roads, and that could be combined, and usually there are agreements that are set up for that, and the traffic control plan ought to indicate that. But local agencies are responsible for the temporary traffic control generally on their roads, and we're trying to do education about that as well. How about for traffic counts? It depends on who's doing the traffic counts for that. I'm not sure. I don't know who's responsible for traffic counts on the local road systems. I guess it would depend on the agency that's doing the traffic counts, or whoever is applying for the permit to do work on specific things or on specific roads. They're the ones who are responsible for providing the traffic counts. So MnDOT counts on the local roads. Okay. So we would be responsible for following the field manual on the local roads. And I think with any of these cases, we need to notify the local road authority when we're going to be out there. We need to get permits from local road authorities, and we need to notify local road authorities when we're out on their roads, just so, and that's good practice anyway, because if we're doing work on their local road system, but another utility is coming in, the local road agency needs to know that so that they can figure out where traffic is going to go. So are there any additional questions out there? I kept you past the time that I had promised, and I will accept emails or questions through that. I'm more than happy to answer any of those types. So,
Ken, this is Brett here in District 7.
Hey Brett, how you doing?
Good. Quick question. I would bet that all our sign shops or maintenance aren't currently bringing detectable edges with them when they do sign installations on stands.
Yep.
Is there recommended? I mean, are other districts fabricating their own, or is there an off-the-shelf product that they can look at?
To my knowledge, there is not an off-the-shelf product for this. Now the portable, because generally MnDOT we might use Z stands, or we might end up using the steel tube NCHRP 350 crash tested device that we have on our website. And really, the time that you need to use those is if you happen to be putting a portable sign stand or a portable sign on an existing sidewalk.
Yeah.
If you're able to have a sign that's up to 7 feet high and you post mount it and it's above that 7 feet height, then you can get away without putting a detectable edge around it. But actually, we've added flexibility in that area. The federal MUT and what our previous MUT said prior to us adding this language, it basically said that you can't put portable sign stands in walkway areas. We know we have to do it, and so that's why we have come up with this additional with a detectable edge to help direct pedestrians around it. But we can't be putting hazards in the way of visually impaired pedestrians, and that's the big issue about this.
Sure. I mean, we have some sections where urban, you've got no boulevard, you've got to put it essentially, I don't know if it's definitely within the sidewalk, but it's somebody could definitely, a place somebody could definitely walk to and then run into the sign. So I'm just wondering, if we start scrambling, if we're ever going to enforce it with locals and contractors, we've got to do it ourselves first.
Yep, I'd agree. We should be doing it. And we actually should have been doing it because of other language. What we just did is we made it a little bit more clear in our language on how you could actually do this. There really wasn't much guidance out there before on this. The rules were set, but people weren't necessarily following the rules because they didn't know what they ought to do instead. And so we were trying to come up with things that they can do in addition to what the rules would have said in the past. Maybe what we need to start considering is maybe we need to take a parking lane or taking out parking stalls or things like that in order to put up signs. And I know that's going to be an issue in some areas, but you've got to balance the walkers as well as the driving public.
Yeah, we definitely take a parking lane first to put a sign out. The problem is when there's not an adequate parking lane to even get a sign on a stand in. So I think it's something we'll have to kind of fumble our way through until we can get it right.
Another alternative to this is doing post-mounted signs. It's kind of a hassle to do them, but as long as you put a post-mounted sign that's 7 feet at the base, you don't have to have a detectable edge around it. So any other questions out there? I know it's Friday afternoon. Okay, well, I'd like to thank you for watching what we have here. And again, this is getting recorded, and so I'll make this available for other people if you wanted to share it with others. This is, to us, I think it's a good way to convey what the changes are to the field manual. Again, any new users of the field manual ought to go through a full training for the field manual. This is for experienced users of the field manual to see what the big differences were between this and the previous version. So I hope everyone has a great weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.